Good evening and welcome to the Hollywood Babylonians. Hello, friends. This is your happy Hollywood history host, Mr. Ben Burke, back today with that wonderful singer, actor, and dancer of the off-Broadway and Broadway stage, Miss Ruby Rakos, as we continue to discuss Vincent Minnelli's charming holiday musical Meet Me in St. Louis from MGM in 1944, starring Judy Garland, Margaret O'Brien, Lucille Brimmer, Leon Ames, Mary Astor, Marjorie Main, Harry Davenport, and Tom Drake. Only on the Hollywood Babylonians. Do you have like any other notes, anything that you really like to share?
I mean, for the film itself, I think my favorite part is probably Margaret O'Brien as Tootie.
Yes.
Um, she's so strange, so morbid. With giving her dolls funerals and burying them in the backyard.
Mhm.
Um, and all the stuff with the Halloween was very strange. It was Halloween in 1903 involving like a bonfire in the street and like kids dressed as like little hobos and like throwing flour on I know the flour part, but,
Yeah.
throwing flour at people, but I didn't know, like I mean, it was like Lord of the Flies out there,
I read
and
up on it, and yes, that's something that actually happened because it was like they were all cross dressed. All
yeah.
of these little children were cross dressed. It looks like a riot that we've seen in recent years.
Yeah.
And these children go out and they try to kill the neighbors that they hate most with flour. And I know that sequence was almost cut from the film, but it did wonders for Margaret O'Brien. Yeah. Oh man, little Margaret O'Brien. She's just a trip.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I have to say, I mean, the scene, after, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, where she runs out into the snow and beats up the snowmen that they built. I mean, what did they do to that girl to make her break down like that? Because I was like, I mean, no 5, 6-year-old has the acting capabilities
No.
to do that. And it wouldn't be odd, even today, really, for a child actor to be, I don't know, kind of traumatized into having that sort of response. I mean, it was really intense.
I mean, you might have heard. Yeah, she does. She kills those snowmen. She takes that bait. Does she take a stick? Not a baseball bat, but a stick.
Yeah, I think it was a stick, but like just like her like heaving sobs and just like I mean, I was like, this is a actual 5-year-old having a complete meltdown.
Right. It's like you're going full Betty Davis on
Yeah.
everybody, and it
Yeah.
is
And so
overwhelming.
all I could think was like, what did they do to her to make her do that?
Well, and that leads us to another interesting point. They told so Margaret O'Brien, I believe, had a little pit bulldog or some little puppy that she had just gotten, and Margaret O'Brien's mother told Vincent Minnelli, everybody that was working with her on that set, in order to get her to cry, you tell her that this little puppy has died, and that's how they got her to cry. Which I'm like, why would you tell a child
Of
that?
course they
Why?
did that. Of course they did that.
Of
Okay, that
course.
makes sense.
Yes, and that's why she was, yeah. Oh man, at 5 or 6, if I had a puppy that died, I would have had a full emotional meltdown
Yeah,
too.
and in acting, all you have to I mean, honestly, I mean, kids have such a wild imagination. I mean, all you'd have to tell her is like it pretend that he did die. Like he's fine. But
Right.
like how would you feel if he did? Like what
Yeah.
would you miss? And like kids have a really good imagination. Like that's all acting is.
Right. Kids are
I mean,
better
you
actors
didn't
than
have
we
to,
are.
I mean, you didn't have to convince her that her puppy was actually dead.
Yeah. Margaret had been signed to the studio at 4 or 5 several years before. Her mother took her to the studio, got her into the office of like Mayor or Freed, and Manelli was in the office, and she was dressed in this little plaid kilt and little cap, and she was giving this big scene, and Manelli was like, wow, she is amazing. Now you would be like, oh, come on, this is ridiculous. They signed her to the studio. They started her in several, I think Journey for Margaret was one of them, and the Canterville Ghost, which were big. big vehicles for her, and also MGM was obsessed with Shirley Temple, which they never could get, who at one time I think was supposed to play Dorothy, but they couldn't get her from Fox. Yeah, Margaret O'Brien. I know that Vincent Minnelli said that because after the first several years that Margaret was at Metro, she had worked with their resident acting coach. And when Margaret came on set, she was this big, huge Shakespearean actress. Everything was over the top. And Minnelli said that added a lot of time that he had to sit and work with her and work out all of this big performance that she was getting, because she had worked with, I can't remember her name, but she was the resident acting coach at MGM. The older she got, the less money her films made, which is, kind of common for a lot of child stars. So I know that a lot of the Sally Benson stories, which are the 3531 Kensington Avenue stories, a lot of the sequences were true to life. Oh, also talking about Margaret O'Brien, John Fricke in the commentary that I was just listening to. So the Halloween sequence where Margaret O'Brien claims that she has been beat up by the boy next door, and then Judy goes over and gives him a piece of her mind, which I think is one of the great sequences in classic film musicals, because it's like, yeah, we're not going to take it anymore. I am woman, hear me roar. In the book, the Kensington Avenue stories, the sequence where Tootie was beaten up really took place, and she was beaten up by the boy next door. But things such as this, like little girls being beaten up by older men, even you could drop the R word in there, that 4-letter nasty little R word. Were not talked about a whole lot. So this was something where Tootie really was beaten up by the boy next door. Her father went over and had a talk with the boy next door's father about what had happened, and he was like, "Oh, I'll talk with him," and they exchanged cigars, and that's all that happened. And that is the only time that the boy next door came into the Kensington Avenue stories. It was the idea that one of the girls was madly in love with him came from the mind of the screenwriters, which I found fascinating. So this
Okay.
Yeah, so this rapist boy next door in the movie, Judy Garland's love interest was really this rapist boy next door in the books, which is,
Oh wow.
yeah. I know we're unpacking. We're sounding woke now, aren't we? Unpacking a lot.
They would have never put that in the movie.
No, no. That would have been a lot, but that is really the darkest sequence in the entire film, because that's very traumatic sequence for a family at that time. I know families at that time lost children at a higher rate than they do now, but for them to lose a member of the family like that, and you could see that in the movie, they're all overwhelmed at the thought that something could have happened to Tootie. And anyway, it might have happened to Agnes. I know a lot. Sally Benson based the character of herself on Agnes, or Agnes played Agnes was Sally Benson in the books, but because Joan Carroll was less known, everything that happened to Sally Benson happened, instead of to Agnes, it happened to Tootie in the movie, because Margaret O'Brien was the bigger star. So, do you have things about this film that you do not like?
Most of the music I'm not a big fan of, other than
Yeah.
like the original, like other than like, the Boy Next Door, Trolley Song, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. Like everything else is just it's those those songs they come up with to do, or they pull out of some old book to do for
Mhm.
like a big dance number. You get a
Yeah.
lot of that with like stuff like Strike Up the Band. You get like really weird songs that they decide to do for like a big dance number.
The La
um
Conga.
the La Conga, yes, exactly. I do love that movie.
Yes.
Drummer Boy is like
Oh,
so
it's my favorite.
amazing. I mean,
Yes.
Mickey Rooney is such a good drummer.
Yes.
So the fact that like everyone's using someone else's trumpet is really grosses me
I
out.
know. I was gonna
And
that's
like no
one thing.
one's upset about it.
That, like, the Paul Whiteman jazz band is like, "All right, they sound pretty good." And it's like,
Yeah,
"What
and it's
about all
like
that?"
he's using my trombone. It's like $5,000.
Right? It's like they're putting all of their saliva and DNA into these
I
instruments. Why
know.
aren't you angry?
But it is a great number, so I
Yes.
could see why they'd let it slide. Yeah, so those numbers are not my favorite. Yeah, I think that's probably my least favorite part is those like bigger, yeah, group numbers that aren't, the trolley song,
Yeah.
basically.
Yes, yeah, and I mean, I can see that. I know Skip to My Lou wasn't written by Blaine and Martin, even though they're credited with writing that
Yeah.
song. It had been a folk song for some
Yes,
time,
of
but
course.
they're the people that came up with the arrangement for
Yeah.
that. It's just precarious film because it's made so well and so beautifully, but at the same time, for our sensibilities today, it's like it doesn't seem like it has much of a plot. It's about, a privileged white family living in turn of the century St. Louis. And it is. It's a very beautiful film. It's very well constructed. Judy, it's one of the very first times that I think she really, really got to show off her talent as a very, impressionable young woman with great expression. And she had beautiful eyes, which you never really had seen before.
Yeah,
So,
it's the white eyeliner on the
mhm.
on the waterline really just like makes her eyes pop.
Well, and I didn't even notice the white eyeliner until John Fricke said something about it on the commentary, and I was like, "Oh, now I notice it." Because
Yeah.
in Technicolor you see everything. Boy, were they going to show you color. Um, yeah.
There was one quote that I now can't find who said it, but it was about the costume design.
Mhm.
Cuz the costume designer uh
Irene Sheriff.
yes, Irene,
Yeah,
she was trying to, be very. Oh, I found it. I found the quote. Okay.
great.
Her attempts at the 1903 costume design and like trying to be like realistic and like
Mhm.
historically accurate. Arthur Freed was like, "How could you have a star with no cleavage?"
I heard that. Yeah,
Yeah. So, I
and
mean,
it's
they
like,
found a way to do it, but
well, and he said that Mary Astor, you would believe it on Mary Astor, but you couldn't have an ingenue in a film with no bosom, you know.
right.
Which is what he said, always coming back to sex.
Yeah. Well, whereas they used to be upset about Judy having a bosom, so
Exactly.
how
They
how the
they
how the turns have tabled.
I know. They pressed it down for Wizard of Oz and now they're trying to.
Yeah, and earlier movies too. Well, because they
Oh
thought
yeah.
she was fat. That's the problem. But that red dress she wears at the ball is
Mhm.
gorgeous. I love that
Yes.
red dress.
And that is one of Manelli's favorite colors was red. I mean, and you can
In
tell
the
it in this.
pirate, she's in red.
Yes.
Yeah.
In any in Brigadoon that Manelli directed, Sid Charisse and like the big pivotal number is in red. In Gigi, there is so much red that you can barely stand it. In movies, well, and red is my favorite color. It's gorgeous, and I think he uses it very effectively most of the time. In Bells Are Ringing, there's a big party sequence where Judy Holliday wears a red dress. His ingenues in the films really in the big pivotal scene, it was like he was going to always have them in red. And then throughout this entire movie, you can tell red is his favorite color because the entire house, all of the drapes are red. There's red lampshades everywhere. And it gives it a very beautiful, beautiful look. I don't think red was quite used in Technicolor as it had been in this film. Irene Sheriff, who is fabulous, she designed so many costumes for Manelli during her time at Metro, and then she went over to Fox. She designed the costumes for The King and I, for she designed them for Hello Dolly, which actually in Hello Dolly, a lot of the extras are wearing costumes from Meet Me in St. Louis. So anyway, she was great at kind of period pieces or like big musical things, and she's one of my favorite costume designers for Metro. But she's another one that said that during this time Mayer kept calling Judy his little hunchback. And he said every time he said that, I wanted to hit him as hard as I can because she said, you know what that does to a little girl that already thinks she's so ugly.
Well,
But
I
she
didn't
wasn't.
realize that he was still calling her that at this point.
Mhm. Well, yeah,
Um,
and and it's like, why are you the Vincent Minnelli just proved your point wrong. She's not a little hunchback. She's gorgeous.
yeah, it was those earlier films because I mean she's like 13, she's
Right.
going through puberty. She's also 4'11, she's a very small person.
Right.
And because she wasn't, I don't know, Lana Turner, she was, they didn't want to see her. And I
Well,
honestly think like her posture wasn't bad. It was just I think around people who she couldn't be herself with or she wasn't safe with was
right.
really. what sort of brought her into herself. Because when you
Exactly.
watch her perform, and around the people that know and love her and care about her, you know, she's fine. She's very open.
From what all I've heard is she was very open, she was very witty, she was a very funny person and great person to be around. But yeah, I think she was built differently than the glamour girls at MGM because, I've heard that she had a shorter torso than most and longer legs than most, and that when she was trying to grow into herself as a teenage girl, that that's when they were giving her the hard time. If Bob's Burgers has taught us anything, I don't know if you watch Bob's Burgers, there's a character on there, Tina. It's like,
Of course.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like I feel like we're all Tina at parts, but Judy, starting out at the studio, was more Tina than most. So
Yes.
yeah. um which
That's
is
a good
yeah.
comparison.
Yeah, I mean, why would you ever talk to a little child that way? Oh, I was going to say something else.
Or at
um
this point, a grown woman. She was 20 years
exactly.
old. She was an
Yeah.
adult.
Which I feel when I was 20, I was still very much a child, and I don't
Yeah,
know.
but the fact that people keep calling her a little girl, like
Ugh,
even like Joe Mankiewicz is like calling her that, she's a very like, what did you say, like messed up little girl or
yeah.
broken little
Ugh,
girl. I was like, A, you're in a relationship with her.
right.
She's an adult.
Yes.
She's like 18, 19. So like
Right.
sure, she's not like, a full grown woman, but she's still not a little girl.
Exactly. She's much bigger than that yeah. Anyway, we could talk about it. It makes me angry, and I feel like a lot of that went on. It still goes on today, unfortunately. But I mean, Metro. Oh, I was going to say something about Lana Turner too. Oh, Judy told, I think, Joan Crawford that she felt like a little pollywog because Joan and Judy were at the studio at the same time and they were good friends. But also, she told her every time, because she tried, when Lana got to the studio in 38, Judy tried to befriend her. And she told her that she was in love with Mickey Rooney. Lana Turner went on to date Mickey Rooney for a long time. She told her that she was in love with Artie Shaw. Then she turned around, whoops, she's with Artie Shaw. So it was almost like Lana was just like going after guys that Judy wanted. And Lana even went after Tyrone Power after Judy was through with him. And Lana said that Tyrone was the great lost love of her life.
I also
Also,
wasn't Tyrone Power also a closeted gay man?
he was bisexual, and
Yeah.
so
Oh, okay. He was
yeah,
bi.
he
Yeah.
slept with a lot of the women and a lot of the men,
Got
so he
it.
had them both. And um,
I know
yeah,
Judy ran off with him at one point.
she did, and I
Yeah.
believe, yeah, she did run. She tried to run off with several people, and she told him because his wife was not going to let Judy marry him. His Tyrone Power's French actress wife was not going to give him a divorce, so Judy told the French actress wife that she was going to have a baby, which people don't know if is real or not. But eventually she said, well, I've lost the baby, and she did that to Joe Mankiewicz also, and Joe kind of played along because he said in his memoirs he kind of felt sorry for her. So anyway, he played along with the baby, and then he finally asked her to do another pregnancy test, and she it did not come up positive. I just thought, talking about Lana, I don't know if you've seen many films with Lana Turner. There are several good ones, such as Green Dolphin Street, The Bad and the Beautiful, Imitation of Life. But a lot of the women at Metro did not like Lana Turner. You know who Esther Williams is? Or you've heard of her before? The
Yes.
Yes, big Technicolor Aquacade musical star at Metro for a long time, and they all had to, the Technicolor stars had to deal with a thing before they shot called a lily, which was a very very heavy big piece of slate, and they had to hold that while they focused all of they color balance the entire picture because Technicolor is just it's really really ripe. It is like colors on cocaine, and I think it's gorgeous, but sometimes it's just too much. But Esther Williams said she would have to stand in the swimming pool and hold it over her head for like 20 minutes while they color balanced everything. And she said, I often wondered what Lana Turner was holding while I was holding this damn slate. She said I knew what she was holding, and it was Louis B. Mayer's dick. A lot of people did not like Lana, but
Yeah, well, she was very ambitious, and she knew how to get what she wanted.
exactly. And I mean, I wish I had
Well,
Lana's
that's
ambition.
how, unfortunately, how you had to kind of do it at that time.
Exactly, and that's another talking about Judy more also. Like we did All About Eve like 2 episodes ago, and look, reading in the life of Joan Crawford, a lot of these women had to be. They knew that it was a man's world, and they had to be smarter than that because they were business people that had to keep themselves going. I feel like, and they had great longevity with their careers, but with Judy, I feel like she was just kind of thrown into it, and she did not exactly want. I feel like she was a very intelligent person. If she wanted to have that kind of be smarter than the men that were running the show, she could have. But at the time, she just really didn't care, or she didn't exactly want to. I know that after 44 or 45, she had gone to New York City with Vincent Minnelli and saw New York. She loved New York. And then somebody interviewed her shortly after that. And they said, well, what's next for Judy Garland? She said, well, after my contract is up in 46, I'm going to move to New York and star on Broadway. After Meet Me in St. Louis came out, the executives were like, this cannot happen because she is really a gold mine now. So when she fell in love with Minnelli and they got married, the studio really pushed. Well, it was, Minnelli became one of those other people under contract that was to keep an eye on Judy and keep her in line. So the fact, by the time she got to the Pirate and she didn't want to be at the studio, she was she had bad postpartum depression. So that was another thing that just pushed her. She didn't care whether she was there or not. She was just kind of being forced to be there at times, especially later in her years at Metro.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
I yeah, I can't help but think she might have been happier going to New York.
Right.
Um I mean her concert, I mean her time on stage, I mean that was when she started her concert career. Um it really brought her back to, her roots of like vaudeville and performing for an audience, and was really, you know, the reason she loved performing was the response from the audience, and you don't get that in movies.
Mm-mm. For sure. And she had started out, on the stage in vaudeville, and I think she loved the audience, and she knew the audience loved her, and that was taken away from her when she was given the big studio contract. But I wanted to ask you, since I have you here, if you have any favorite films of Judy's.
Oh, I mean, I love Finds Andy Hardy. That's probably
Mhm.
my favorite. I just love that film so much. She's so cute, and just her and Mickey together are just is just so perfect.
Right.
I love Finds Andy Hardy is probably my number one. I also really like Strike Up the Band.
Yeah.
I wish they would dress her in something less hideous. It's like the same design dress with like these
Yeah.
big puffy sleeves, and she's like in a variation of that dress in the whole film, and it's so ugly.
Well, it's
um
like ugly 1980s prom dresses throughout the entire
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
and like she wears a sort of the red dress in Meet Me in St. Louis is like a similar design, but
Hmm.
it's flattering.
Yes. It's like it creates this beautiful torso.
Well,
It has a beautiful
it was like
shape.
if we make her shoulders bigger, her waist will look smaller or something. Like it's
Yeah.
so hideous. It's so hideous, but I love that movie. I also really like Everybody Sing.
Hmm.
That's a really fun one. It's harder to find. I think the only way I've ever
Yeah.
watched it is it was in parts on YouTube. I don't even know if it's still up anymore.
Yeah.
And that's how I'd watched it. Other than the scene where she disguises herself in blackface to get a job at the
Hmm.
singing restaurant, that one's weird. That part's unnecessary. She could have just put on a fake mustache or something. Um,
Right.
but at least it's not like Babes in Arms where you get through the whole film and then suddenly the show they've been putting on this whole time was a minstrel show and like no
Right.
hints, no clues, and suddenly the last like 25 minutes is all blackface.
Yeah.
That came out of nowhere. Um
Well, I mean, okay, so what I remember about Babes in Arms, like the entire show that they're trying to put together in the barn, there's a giant storm that tears down the barn where they're trying to put on this minstrel show. So they don't get to put on the minstrel show. I haven't seen Babes in Arms in a long time. I know at the end of Babes on Broadway, which is one of my it was one of my favorite ones until you get to the end and that rousing waiting for the Robert E. Lee, and you're like, and she sings FDR Jones, and yeah, and it's just like Oh man, this is such great music and such great performances, but
And then we're gonna
good.
throw the Confederacy in there just to
Yes.
ruin it. And
Yeah.
not until the end, so you have no clue what you're getting yourself into
No.
until the end of the movie, and it just pops up out of nowhere.
Well,
Um,
and I think that's that waiting for the Robert E. Lee number is the most spectacular. Not spectacular in like the good sense, but has the
yeah.
most spectacle of any Mickey and Judy musical number outside of um oh, I Got Rhythm.
Mhm.
Um yeah, which is just it's just a shame. But I mean, we're not trying to cancel these movies. So many people are like, woke people are trying to
Well, they're
cancel these
hard to
movies.
watch. That's the
Yeah.
problem. Is
Uh-huh.
like I just it's a hard time it's like I'll watch to the point where it gets weird and then I'm like I can't enjoy it 'cause it
No.
just makes me so uncomfortable. And it was like if you close your eyes, it sounds really nice. Um
Right.
but back to Everybody Sing, I mean, you've got Fanny Bryce in that movie,
Mhm.
and there's a scene on a bus where they all like are running around. I don't remember the song that they sing on the
Yeah.
bus, but I really love that scene. That movie is really great. I really
Mhm.
love that movie. And then Judy and Fanny Bryce went on to do I mean, Fanny Bryce, the baby Snookum's character, was,
Yes.
a big thing. And then she and Judy went on to kind of continue that little act that they do in the movie on the
Mm.
radio for a
Right.
long time too.
Yes, which is great. Yeah, I haven't seen Everybody Sing in a hot second.
Yeah, I haven't seen
Very,
it
very long
in
time.
years.
Um,
Yeah.
but doesn't Billy Burke, who plays Glinda, play her mother in that? I
Yes,
think.
Billy Burke is in it. Oh, and she
Yes.
also it starts with her getting kicked out of school. That's what starts the whole thing. She
Right.
gets kicked out of school and
Is
it's
it that?
Swing Mr. Mendelssohn Swing,
Yes.
which I oh my god, I love that song. We do that song in Chasing Rainbows as
Yes.
well. Uh and just at the end they get caught and she
Mm.
just sort of presses her nose up against the glass door before she leaves. It's so cute. That movie's really really wonderful. Love Finds Andy Hardy is probably number one. I
Mm.
do like Strike Up the Band. I just can't stand the costumes.
Yeah, it's unfortunate
um,
because it is a great movie. It has some Lakonga and Drummer Man. Drummer Man is probably my favorite number of any Mickey and Judy
for
movie.
sure. I mean, I
Mm.
don't know how Mickey Rooney in La Conga didn't like just. I mean, he must have had whiplash after that number
Yeah.
because the way he's like flinging his head around.
Uh-huh.
Oh my god. But yeah, no, that's yeah. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that Mickey Rooney was an amazing drummer,
Mm.
but that
And
that number is
xylophonist. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, he
Yeah.
played the xylophone in that too.
Mhm.
And then they also have that whole sequence with the fruit, the like stop motion
Yes.
fruit story of
Mhm.
our love affair.
Yeah. I know, which is you wonder how difficult was that to shoot back in 1940, honestly. It must have been ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, we have Arthur Freed also to thank for those movies because he had, well, a little bit on Arthur Freed. People don't, I don't think, realize that, the MGM musicals that we know and love today are because of Arthur Freed. He had been a songwriter at MGM in the late 20s with his songwriting partner, Nashio Herb Brown, and he had always really wanted to produce film musicals. And finally, he got Mervyn LeRoy, who was one of his friends, came over to Metro from Warner Brothers, and they had always loved Wizard of Oz, always wanted to put together a musical film of Wizard of Oz, so they got to do that and showcase Judy. I think Arthur Freed, despite him mistreating her, because I know eventually it got to the point where he was just shoving her around and picking her up and throwing her into projects. He didn't care how Judy felt. It was if she could get the work done or not, if she could make him money. But I think he really was one that recognized talent and good talent. And that's why, when he started producing films, starting with The Wizard of Oz and going into the Mickey Rooney, Judy Garland's films, he started to create his own unit, his own production unit at MGM, which is what led to some of Judy's great Technicolor classics at Metro. Um, but yeah, I think everybody should at least go watch Strike Up the Band and Girl Crazy and Love Finds Andy Hardy because those are
Strike Up
just
the Band, I believe, is actually on HBO Max right now because TCM has it.
Yes. Well,
Um,
yes.
I was
I
like
know.
tinkering around there, and a lot of Andy Hardy movies are there,
Mm,
except none of the ones with Judy in it, I don't think.
no. Well,
It's
I've
just like
seen.
a bunch of Andy Hardy movies that I've never seen and I have no interest in watching because she's not in
Right.
them.
Well,
Oh
yeah,
no,
and
Andy
there was.
Hardy meets Debutante. It has Andy Hardy meets Debutante.
Yes, and there
And
were
that's
so.
a good one too. I'm Nobody's
Yeah.
Baby is a really good song.
Hmm.
Alone, the way that song she does really beautifully, and it sort of turns
Yes.
the tables because she's less of the ugly duckling girl next door, and
Hmm.
Mickey Rooney's sort of on her turf in New York, and
Right.
he sort of like realizes that she's like, a really like cool and interesting person, and she has the upper hand.
Right.
Even though he does, of
Yes.
course, fall in love with a debutante, but who is a friend of Judy's and is like in on it and like
Right.
gets him turned back towards Judy.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh yeah. And yes, okay, so I started cuz for some reason they s- they put all of these Andy Hardy movies on HBO Max. I know that well, yeah, I started Andy Hardy Meets Debutante, which I had seen a lot before. And so I started it and I was like, I have seen this at least 10 times. I don't think I can watch it again. But it's a great movie. Definitely go watch it. I know that one of John Frickey's good friends over at Warner Brothers is George Feldenstein, who I love because he is the film historian at Warner Brothers who owns now the vintage RKO library where like Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire were in the 30s. They own the pre 1986 MGM library and they own the vintage Warner Brothers library. And he's also in charge of the Warner Archive, which does very expensive restorations on these classic films, put them on HBO Max and Blu-ray. So I know every time they do like a new remastering or a new restoration of one of these classic films, it pops up on HBO Max and they show it on TCM. So that may be one of the reasons that it's on HBO Max is like they did a new 4K scan of the camera
Yeah,
negative
well,
or something like
TCM
that.
is like under the HBO Max like thing because you got like Cartoon Network and you've got like a
Right.
bunch of other stuff. So yeah, I was, and then I mean, I think A Star Is Born is already on HBO Max, which I
Hmm.
have never actually finished. I watched it on a plane to Minnesota. Was it Minnesota? Yeah, Minnesota,
Oh
and
man.
the flight was shorter than the movie.
Oh
So
yeah.
I didn't finish the movie. I still have, like the last like half hour I've never watched.
Oh well, and
Um
it's good. I think it's one of Judy's best performances. It is really long, and
and it
it
was
goes.
longer, like it was longer,
Yeah.
and but as a result, like the movie is so like cut apart and like truncated, and you
Mm,
just get these like weird those
black and white.
intercuts of
Yeah.
the black and white with the photos, and I'm like, and then they I think the film, the extra rolls of film with the stuff that got cut, like
Mhm.
were destroyed in a fire or something, in that
Yeah.
big fire, so like we'll
Yeah.
just never be able to put together the what 4 hour movie.
Right. I know. Well, and I in
Which
the
I would
book
love to see, which I think would be a better movie.
Oh yeah. Well, and it was breaking box office records across the country until well, Jack Warner was the head of Warner Brothers, and this was Judy's first film at Warner Brothers because she had been at Metros for so long, and Jack Warner did not get along with Judy, and he did not get along with her husband Sid Luft, who also produced it, and Harry Warner talked Jack Warner. Harry Warner was Jack Warner's brother into cutting down the movie. So they cut it down so much, and then they started to get complaints like, "This movie doesn't make sense. We're not seeing the original full movie." So it actually lost money at the box office because of that fiasco, and then all of that footage was lost on the cutting room floor, except for the audio, which you can hear under all of those black and white stills. You know,
Right.
but yeah, it does make it where like the first time I saw it on TCM, I probably was in middle school, and I thought, oh, that's kind of a cool artsy thing that they're doing with these black and white photos, and then I was like, but it's like 20 or 30 minutes of black and white photos, and this feels like they're overdoing it, but it's like really, they cut out all of the footage.
Yeah,
But
they've
yes,
done that like for like one or two time jumps, like okay, but it
yeah.
just keeps happening. We're like, where's all the movie? Where's the movie?
Right. It's like it's just black and white photos. But yes, and also you talked about that fire. a lot of people don't talk about that fire. I think it was like a 1976, 77 fire
Yeah,
at the
yeah, I
George
think it was
Eastman
like late
house.
70s. Yeah.
Yes. And it was because in the mid 60s, Culver City, where Metro is located, it's not a huge, at that time it wasn't a huge booming metropolis. And they said, okay, so we have to go back real fast. The classic films up to 1953 were shot on a film stock that was made of nitrate. And you might know this. Nitrate is what's used in gunpowder, but it also has this beautiful silvery sheen that gave black and white this gorgeous silvery sheen. But they had to store them like in refrigerated areas, because if they get too hot, they could explode. If they're around, certain chemicals, they will explode.
Yeah.
So Culver City in the mid 60s went to the executives at MGM and were like, okay, so this is a threat to our community because you have this entire, like,
Warehouse full of just gunpowder.
yes. So they made interpositives of the entire thing, like they made copies of all of it, and they did something that Fox didn't do, which is they made like they made Technicolor imbibition. Well, I don't know. I can't. They copied the Technicolor in a way that it was going to retain its luster, whereas Fox dumped all of their Technicolor camera negatives. So with all Carmen Miranda, Betty Grable movies, Alice Faye, that original Technicolor is lost. But yeah, in the 70s, they were storing all of these original camera negatives for some of Metro's biggest films, biggest classic musicals, well, and films in general. And I'm not sure what started it, but man, that was a fire. That was like Hiroshima going off, because it was just all that gunpowder feeding off of one another. I
Yeah,
can't even
and there
imagine.
goes like a huge part of old
Right.
Hollywood history.
Exactly. But I mean, the good thing is that they had made like good preservation prints of the original Technicolor negatives and the black and white film, so when they go back and restore them, they have something that looks good that they can restore them off of. Not all studios have that anymore
Yeah.
because anyway, film preservation not doesn't mean as much to other people as it does to me. Do you have any other thoughts on the movie? I've enjoyed talking to you so much and hearing everything that you have to say.
No, I don't think I have anything else to say, but thank you for asking me to do this. Even
Oh,
though it's, a year in the making.
I know.
Um,
Well, and of course, anytime, and maybe I'd love to do some more Judy films in the future if you'd ever be interested in maybe coming back to talk about another one. Or this
yeah,
may have been one
especially
and done.
like any anything before 1939, like
Right.
I know a lot.
Let's do Pigskin Parade next.
Oh my god. She's only in
Just
that's her first movie. She's
right.
in it. That one's on YouTube as well, I believe, is where I
Hmm.
watched that. But she's only in like the last like 30 minutes of the movie.
Right.
And she did not like it. She did not like the way she looked. Because
No.
you could see all her freckles, and I guess that was a problem back then. It was like no one
Right.
liked freckles. And she just
Right.
hated it. I mean, she didn't really start to feel comfortable on camera until she started working with Mickey Rooney.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah. Bless his heart. Of all the
Yeah,
stuff Maggie Rooney did, one of the great things was befriending Judy Garland.
that's for
So
sure.
yeah, yeah, I did. I really, really appreciate you coming on today and hearing everything that you have to say. I think you probably more than anybody else outside of John Frecky know more about Judy Garland than anyone, which is great. Well, and I'm not sure about that. There's a lot of people online that
Yeah, I don't think
claim
I
to
know that
know.
much. I actually, for someone who plays her on stage, I don't know. I only know like a very condensed part of her life. I mean, I know
Well,
the basics of the rest of
right.
it, but
I feel like you know
I
more.
really like the beginning.
Yes. Well, the beginning is great and it makes one hell of a show, let me tell you. Yeah, I feel like you know more about a certain time in her life that a lot of people don't because a lot of
Yeah,
people.
it's not a part of her life that has really gotten any coverage.
Right.
And it is just as interesting and dramatic as like any other part of her life. It's just not as sexy, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
don't
she's
know.
12, so yeah, I would hope not.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, just like the family dynamics, her early years at MGM, her
Mhm.
friendship with Mickey Rooney. I mean,
Mhm.
it's all, her finding her style, her vocal style, which is,
Yes.
heavily influenced by Roger Edens.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
And Hopefully I can see it, maybe on Broadway one day. I did want to ask you, well, first of all, to our listeners, I know you shake your head and roll your eyes. It's going to happen, Ruby. You're going to win the Tony. Everybody listening needs to go to YouTube and watch Ruby, it's a number from the show, isn't it? Got a pair of new shoes?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yes. Which is just so much fun to watch, and I think it's several years old, but it's so awesome.
Yeah, it's
And
a
it's
music video we did a couple years ago. Or
yes,
I
and it's
guess
based on a
more than a
song.
couple. Because I gotta like subtract 2 years from all my or add 2 years to all my like memories.
Right, exactly. I mean, 2020 didn't happen, right? 2020,
No, and neither
2021.
did 2021 really. And I'm
Mm-mm.
starting to think 2022 didn't happen either, so
I know. We're just lost forever. No more is life. So,
Oh.
but yeah, that Got a Pair of New Shoes is, I think it was her first feature film at Metro, Thoroughbreds Don't Cry, that she
Yes,
sang
those
that song.
thoroughbreds don't cry, which that's a weird scene too. She's like playing the guitar, singing "Got a Pair," trying to like sing to is it Freddie Bartholomew
And Mickey
and
Rooney.
Mickey Rooney, and Mickey Rooney's like in the other room, like trying to take Freddie's pants off the whole time to like give him a
It's a,
massage.
it's
Like
a very homoerotic
it's a
action
very
that they're trying to do.
homoerotic scene, and Judy's on the other side of the door trying to come in and play them a song. It's a
Yeah.
very, very strange scene.
Well, I think Freddie Bartholomew is a jockey, a child jockey.
They're
and-
both jockeys.
Okay,
Mickey
well,
and yeah, but Mickey's like the experienced guy, and Judy's the
Right.
daughter of the people who own the boarding house that the jockeys stay in.
Yeah.
And she's like very like dramatic and like loves acting and performing, and
Yes.
that's also a pretty funny movie. She's pretty good in that one as well.
Yes.
But yeah,
Oh,
that's her
yeah.
first movie with Mickey Rooney.
Yes, and it's fantastic. I think Mickey Rooney's trying to give Freddie Bartholomew like massage his legs so he can ride the horse again, but that's not what it looks like.
But it looks really weird. He's just taking his pants off.
Taking his pants off, rubbing his legs while Judy's singing to them.
And like, but Freddie's fighting him the whole time. Like he doesn't want it to happen.
I know. And there's a type of label that you could call that nowadays, but I'm not going to say it
Yeah.
on our podcast or our podcast. I wanted to one more question, and then I promise I'll let you go. You go run and live your beautiful life. Who plays? I know your dad was played by Max
Von
I
Essen,
can't-
yeah.
Yes, who's Broadway great. I live vicariously through some of these people that are on Broadway on Instagram. But who played Mickey Rooney in Chasing
Oh,
Rainbow?
Mike Wartella. Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. Like I said, spectacular cast.
Yeah, he's wonderful. He then was supposed to close out the season of at the Paper Mill in 2020. So Chasing Rainbows opened the 2019-2020 season, and then
Yeah.
he was going to close out the season with The Wanderer playing Dion DiMucci,
Oh my
which
gosh.
then it didn't happen until this past April.
Yeah.
Yeah, March, April. So he finally got to do that. So
That's so
he's really
cool.
great. So I mean, hopefully we'll see that show on Broadway too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and all of those great. Yeah, I know it's taken a little while. I was just casting the first show since the pandemic yesterday or the day before that. So anyway, it's taking a little
Yeah.
bit of time for things to come back.
Yep.
But anyway, I want to, like I said, thank you again. And if any of our listeners listening today, you're like, I don't know if that's completely correct, one of the historical facts, or there's something that you'd like to add to the conversation, or if there's a movie that you would like for us to talk about, please feel free to write into the HollywoodBabylonians@gmail.com. We'll read your letter on the air. Go follow us on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Until next time, this is
Ruby Rakos.
and Ben Burke. Thank you for listening to the Hollywood Babylonian. You have been listening to the Hollywood Babylonians. The Hollywood Babylonians is produced, edited, and hosted by Ben Burke and co-hosted by Ruby Rakos. Audio engineering by Andrew Davis with artwork by Ben Burke and Jamie Lee. If you liked what you heard today, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe, and follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at the Hollywood Babylonians for more Hollywood Babylonians content. Tune in next Friday, December 29th, for a very special episode of the Hollywood Babylonians. For the Hollywood Babylonians present a Lux Radio Theater drama, Meet Me in St. Louis, as we recreate the original Lux Radio Theater's production of Meet Me in St. Louis from December 2nd, 1946. Thank you for listening, and have a good night.